Hello everyone, Phil Long here. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a question. What are some of the history-changing events that you have seen in your lifetime? For example, for my great-grandparents, it was October 29th, 1929, Black Tuesday, when the stock market crashed to kick off what history calls the Great Depression. For my grandparents, it was December 7th, 1941, when President Franklin D. Roosevelt made his speech announcing that today is a day that will live in infamy because the United States had just been attacked by the Empire of Japan. For my parents, it was November 22nd, 1963, when CBS anchorman Walter Cronkite, the most trusted man in America, announced to the American public that President John F. Kennedy had been killed. I know we have representatives from all over the world, and I'm sure every one of us remember an event in history that changed everything for us. We remember the day, the event, and in many cases, even where we were at when we got the news. For me, personally, it was Tuesday, September 11th, 2001. I was at Baptist Bible College training for the ministry, in the library working on a theology paper when my wife Vala came to get me. She had already planned to meet me in the library so I could take her to work, but the shock on her face told me that something was wrong. What she said first was, "We've been attacked." As soon as she told me what had happened, I had this sudden urge to just run towards something, but really, what good would that have done? I was halfway across the United States. I remember I dropped Val off at work and returned to the college campus to find a TV so I could get a better understanding of exactly what had just happened. After watching the planes crash into the buildings over and over without any explanation as to who, what, or why this had happened, it was time for chapel. I remember walking to chapel, and already some of my fellow military veterans were talking about rejoining the military. One of the ladies who worked with Val and I in our youth ministry stopped me and asked, "Are they going to send my husband off to war?" Obviously, there was a lot of fear and confusion on campus. However, what happened next seemed to calm everyone's nerves. That day in chapel, we were supposed to have a guest speaker, but in light of what had just happened, the vice president of the school had asked him if he would mind stepping aside so that he could address the student body. I will never forget what Dr. Rick Carter said to every one of us scared and anxious ministry students that day. He began by asking this question: has it ever occurred to you that nothing occurs to God? None of this is a surprise to God, and none of this changes the call God has placed on your life. As our world has been changed by this global pandemic, I've thought a lot about those words and how God may want to use me here in Madagascar during this time. Yesterday, while standing in a long line to get groceries, I was texting some of my fellow missionaries to give an update of what I'd seen on my way to the market. In the exchange as to what was going on, one of our brothers said something about feeling for our government here in Madagascar, and that the challenges that they were going to face in an effort to try to keep everyone healthy. As soon as I read that text, the passage in Romans 13 came to mind. Listen to what the first five verses say in Romans 13. Read this with me if you will. "Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authorities resists the ordinances of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For the rulers are not a terror to good work, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of the authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid. For he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. Therefore you must be subject, not only because of the wrath, but also for conscience sake." You know, the first time I used this passage in ministry was with a friend who worked as a police officer. As many of you know, Sunday mornings are very busy for a pastor, and a lot of people always want to talk to you before the service. One Sunday morning, as I was getting ready to get things going and making some last-minute copies, my friend, the police officer, cornered me and said, "I guess you heard what happened last night." I responded, "Actually, no, I don't." His tears swelled up in his eyes. He said, "I had to shoot someone in the line of duty." You see, it was a reoccurring case of what we call in the United States domestic violence. Police have been called over and over to the same house because a man kept trying to hurt his ex-wife and child, but always seemed to manage to escape before the police could make it to the house. One night, the lady called knowing that her ex-husband was waiting for her inside to kill her and actually possibly her child. When the police arrived, they went in to arrest the man, but he began shooting at them and they had no other choice but to return fire, and as a result, the man died. The effect that had on my friend changed him forever. At the time, I was at a loss as to how I was going to minister to him, so I reached out to the head chaplain from the police department where I volunteered, and he pointed me to Romans chapter 13. What I learned from this passage is that a police officer has a call on his or her life, just like I have a call in my life to be a pastor and a missionary. He had a job to do, and he did his job so that the life of that woman and child could be saved. Standing in line yesterday, I received that text, and I was reminded that the government here in Madagascar has a job to do, and the decisions they make are not easy for anyone, including themselves. And we as the Christian community who have been called to serve the Malagasy people need to be praying for those, as Romans 13:1 says, who are appointed by God. Listen, friends, I'm not perfect. If you spend time with me, you're probably going to figure out I love Jesus, but I cuss a little. The truth is, I don't always understand why people do what they do. I don't always understand why leaders make decisions that leaders make, and sometimes I get frustrated. But what I do understand is that this is new to all of us. So if I can, I want to encourage you to pray in 4 areas. First of all, I'd like to encourage you to be praying for the Malagasy government and the leadership, our government leadership. Remember, this is where God has called us, and we need to be praying for those in leadership, no matter what we think of their politics. Second, pray for the Malagasy people. I think we all realize that a stay-at-home order looks a lot different in the Western world than it does in the Third World. So pray that the Malagasy will remain in a state of civil rest. We also know that in the West, people have the ability to buy food and supplies for several days and even weeks. But here, for the most part, can only buy day to day, and without work, getting food and supplies is difficult, so pray for provision for the Malagasy people. Thirdly, pray for the health of the Malagasy people. The healthcare system is not what it is in other parts of the world, so I'm praying that this pandemic has little effect on our people. Then lastly, pray for each other. Just like many of you, I went through a number of emotions dealing with culture shock when I moved to Madagascar. But one of the emotions that I did not have to deal with was loneliness, because we have an awesome Christian community here on the island. And so I want you to know that you are not alone. I just wanted to challenge you to be praying in these areas. And if you have anything that we can pray with you about, please let us know. Thank you for your time, and know that we're praying for you.